My name's Maggie, and I work for a company. I'm 29 years old and just tied the knot with my husband, William. We dated for over 2 years before getting hitched. We kicked off our married life in the apartment I've had since my single days. Dad gifted it to me when I landed this job. With my brother and his wife moving back in with our folks, I figured it was time for me to spread my wings. Dad, being well off, got me a nice apartment close to our family home when I started working. Not sure if he wanted to lend a hand whenever I needed, or just keep me nearby. But either way, I ended up in a fantastic place. When my husband and I decided to tie the knot, his cramped apartment wasn't going to cut it for the both of us. Luckily, I had a spacious place that didn't cost me a dime in rent, so he moved in with me right away. The first time I visited his family's home in a snowy area was during winter. I was blown away by the amount of snow and how chilly it was. Growing up in the city, his family's home felt like a whole new world to me. His mom and brother lived in this quaint old house straight out of a fairy tale, surrounded by fields. Back when my father-in-law was around, they did some farming on the side. Their nearest neighbors were a bit of a hike away. My husband had been living in a tiny apartment, too cramped for both of us. Luckily, I had a spacious place that didn't cost a cent in rent, so he moved in with me right away when we decided to tie the knot. The first time I visited his family's home in a snowy area was during winter. I was amazed by the vast amount of snow and how cold it was. Growing up in the city, his family's home felt like a whole new world to me. His mom and brother lived in this charming old house straight out of a fairy tale. Back when my father-in-law was alive, they used to do some farming on the side. Their house was surrounded by fields, with the nearest neighbors a bit of a trek away. What surprised me even more was that the bathroom was outside the house. I thought I could handle it for short visits, but the idea of living there long-term seemed daunting, especially in winter when it's snowy and freezing. Venturing out to the toilet in the middle of the night takes a lot of bravery. Plus, after a shower, I worried about catching a cold from the chilly temperatures when I visited to meet them for our wedding. I didn't stay overnight, so I didn't experience the shower ordeal, but dealing with the outdoor toilet was definitely tough. However, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law were very kind, which put me at ease. Even though we wouldn't be living together, I wanted to foster a harmonious relationship with them as we became one family, but something nagged at me. While my mother-in-law always greeted me warmly, I noticed she seemed to murmur complaints when alone with my husband. What worried me more was my brother-in-law's previous marriage, which ended in divorce after just a year, a topic my husband avoided discussing. I wanted to ask, but since my husband remained tight-lipped about it, I didn't press the issue. At our wedding, my mother-in-law wore a radiant smile, prompting my father to comment on her kindness. I smiled back, though my own mother had reservations. Despite her smiles in public, she seemed rather sour when she thought no one was watching. "Watch out, she might be two-faced," my mother cautioned. Still, I chose to believe there wouldn't be any problems unless we lived together. We started our married life in the apartment happily, free of worries. However, just 3 months into marriage, my husband began to dump all the household chores on me and make decisions without consulting me. Despite our agreement to share chores since we both worked, he started slacking off. Initially, he helped with tasks like cleaning the bathroom and occasionally cooking dinner when I came home late. But recently, he's become reluctant to do even basic cleaning, leaving me to handle everything, including dinner preparation. Sometimes when I'm cooking after a long day, he'll impatiently demand, "Hurry up, I'm hungry," which only adds to my frustration. Beyond the chores, what really bothers me is his unilateral decision-making. Perhaps there were signs I missed before marriage, or maybe I misjudged him as a decisive and dependable man. Not long after tying the knot, furniture and a sofa suddenly appeared in our home. I was taken aback and asked my husband, "What's going on? Where are we going to put all this new furniture?" He just smiled and said, "I didn't feel the current vibe of our room suited me, so I decided to switch up the furniture for something more to my liking." He wanted to get rid of all the furniture I had chosen and replace it with pieces that matched his taste. If he had talked to me first, we could have picked out furniture together. But he acted on his own, completely disregarding my preferences. It's fine for him to decorate his own space however he wants. But I didn't appreciate him changing our shared living area without discussion. His sense of design didn't seem to make much sense, and I was left speechless by the mismatched colors and shapes of the new furniture. Then came an unexpected proposal. "It'd be great if you could foot the bill for it." After all, this was originally your apartment, right? I was already frustrated that he had taken over the living room with his tasteless furniture, and now he was asking me to pay for it. I wondered if he was joking and asked again, "What? Why should I pay for it? Besides, it's the furniture you bought on your own." I usually don't speak up, but this time I stood my ground. My husband seemed at a loss for words, but it was clear he didn't want to spend his own money. This year marked our first Christmas since getting married, so we decided to spend the holidays at his parents' place. It was my first time staying at their house, so I was feeling anxious and nervous. My mother-in-law spoke kindly, "Maggie, just relax and make yourself at home." However, I couldn't fully let my guard down, mindful of my mother's advice. I remained cautious, sensing there might be more to my mother-in-law than meets the eye. When I first arrived, she did nothing but rest, sharing stories of how brides used to eat alone in the kitchen in the past. "It's nice that we can all eat together now," I said, puzzled by her tales from yesteryears. I noticed my brother-in-law cautioning her, but my husband seemed oblivious. Enduring her sarcastic remarks, I offered to clean up after dinner. She smiled but declined, saying, "I'll handle it. Wouldn't want you to break any of our precious dishes." That's when I realized my mother's advice was on point. The first day was filled with her biting sarcasm, and unfortunately, things only took a turn for the worse the next day. That evening, my husband went out drinking with friends, and with my brother-in-law away on a fire brigade trip, it was just my mother-in-law and me at home. Honestly, I felt quite nervous. After dinner, while she was in the shower, I finally got a moment to relax. But when she emerged, she said, "I'm off to bed now. Don't forget to lock the front door." I awkwardly replied, "Okay," and prepared to take a shower in a separate bathhouse, which was quite chilly. Locals might be used to it, but for me, it was a bit of a challenge. Once I settled in, the lights in the main house suddenly went out. As I relaxed in the bathtub, I thought I heard footsteps outside, so I stayed still and listened carefully. After a while, everything went pitch dark. Initially, I thought it was a power outage, but when I peeked out the window, I noticed the lights in the neighboring house were still on. That's when I started to suspect if my mother-in-law was playing a mean prank on me. I didn't want to believe she would do something so cruel, but given her tendency to make sarcastic remarks with a smile, a sense of unease began to creep into my heart. Feeling a sense of urgency, I hurried out of the shower, dried off, and changed into my pajamas. The room was completely dark at first, making it hard to see anything. But as my eyes adjusted, the moonlight seeping through the window helped me navigate. While I couldn't help but think how immature this prank was, I attempted to open the door to leave, only to find it stubbornly stuck shut, resisting all my efforts to force it open. Panic started to grip me. There was a window, but it was barred from the outside. Thankfully, I had my smartphone with me. I tried calling my husband for help, but he didn't pick up. On the third attempt, he finally answered, shouting loudly, "Why are you bothering me? Can't you see I'm busy right now?" It was clear he was drunk, but I desperately needed his assistance, so I pleaded with him. "I'm stuck in the bathroom. Please come over right away," I pleaded urgently. But it seemed he either didn't grasp the seriousness or didn't care, replying dismissively, "You shouldn't have taken a shower now. I'm too drunk to help. Goodbye." After he hung up, I dialed his number repeatedly, but it seemed he'd switched off his phone. I debated calling the police or fire department, but I wanted to exhaust all options before resorting to that. I hesitated to involve the authorities, fearing my mother-in-law's wrath. First, I tried to find a way out on my own. I thought perhaps if I shouted from the bathroom window, someone passing by might hear me. But to my dismay, the window was frozen shut. My husband had mentioned that the pipes sometimes freeze. If I were to remain trapped here all night, I could freeze to death. Just as I was on the verge of reluctantly dialing the police, a voice from outside startled me. "Is there a power outage? Hello? Is anyone in there?" Relief washed over me upon hearing that voice. I heard a series of knocks, indicating someone was trying to assist, and before long, the door creaked open. Gratefully, I thanked the elderly gentleman who had come to my aid. He sighed and remarked, "She never seems to learn, does she? Always finding ways to make life difficult for her daughter-in-law." This kind neighbor was familiar with my husband's family, a distant relative of his. He escorted me to his own home nearby. Upon seeing me, his wife appeared surprised. After the gentleman explained the situation, she warmly welcomed me inside. With a comforting gesture, she offered me a blanket since I was only dressed in pajamas and served me a cup of steaming hot tea. Once I had regained my composure, the elderly gentleman shared with me the unsettling history of my mother-in-law's treatment of her daughters-in-law. Your mother-in-law has a history of mistreating her son's wives. She's trapped several of them in the bathroom before. The wife of the eldest son was repeatedly locked in there and eventually left the household because of it. And it's not just her. When my husband was engaged to someone else before, the mother-in-law did the same thing to her. The elderly couple had noticed the bathroom light shining through the darkness and grew suspicious, prompting them to come and investigate. They knew about my mother-in-law's past actions and had come to the aid of others in similar situations before. Aware of our marriage, they seemed concerned that my mother-in-law might repeat her harmful behavior. Since it was already late and the main house was locked up, I decided to spend the night with the neighbors. The next morning, I was roused from sleep by the wail of an ambulance siren. Peering out the window, I spotted the ambulance pulling up at my in-laws' place, with my husband standing motionless near the detached bathroom. Curious, I made my way over. Perhaps my husband had mistakenly thought I was still trapped in the bathroom and called for help. But of course, the bathroom was empty. I felt a pang of sympathy for the paramedics, who had been summoned due to my husband's misunderstanding. As soon as my husband laid eyes on me, he erupted, "Why is my mom lying there? Weren't you trapped in the bathroom?" Startled, I glanced inside, only to spot a figure sprawled on the floor. The woman whom the paramedics were tending to sat up, gingerly touching the back of her head. It appeared she wasn't in grave danger, and I recognized her silhouette. It was my mother-in-law. Perplexed as to why she was there, I listened as one of the paramedics explained. She seems to have taken a fall and lost consciousness. We'll take her to the hospital for a checkup. It looks like she slipped on some soap on the floor. In my panic during the blackout, I must have left things scattered, like the soap. With no light to clean up, it seems my mother-in-law slipped and fell when she entered the bathroom to check on me in the early hours of the morning. As my mother-in-law was wheeled past on a stretcher, she shot me a stern glare. When my husband was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, the neighbors approached and offered their sympathy, saying, "We're relieved you're okay. It's like a form of divine retribution for the mistreatment you've endured as a daughter-in-law." I expressed my gratitude to them once more, realizing that without the elderly neighbor's help, I could have been the one being rushed to the hospital. After changing clothes, I informed my brother-in-law about my mother-in-law's hospitalization. He hurried off to join her there. Left alone, I made my way to the detached bathroom, pondering over the events of the previous night. At the bathroom door, I noticed a stick wedged in to keep it shut. That explained why I couldn't open it. That afternoon, my mother-in-law returned home from the hospital with my husband and brother-in-law, and she directed her anger at me. "If you had stayed in the bathroom and let me know, none of this would have happened." Before I could respond, my husband joined in, expressing his frustration. Exactly. If Maggie had just stayed put, my mother wouldn't be in this situation. However, my brother-in-law angrily intervened. "What's wrong with you two? Stop this cruel game of locking my sister-in-law in the bathroom." Later, my brother-in-law returned with a travel bag and announced to my husband and mother-in-law, "I'm done taking care of my mother. I'm leaving this house. Do as you please." Unable to endure it any longer, I turned to my brother-in-law and asked, "I'm leaving too. Could you drop me off at the nearest station?" Despite my husband's attempts to stop me, I stood my ground. "Let's get a divorce. You didn't help me when I needed it yesterday. I'll prepare the divorce papers." I got into my brother-in-law's car, and he drove me to the station, apologizing repeatedly. "I'm truly sorry, Maggie. I never imagined you would go through this. Those cruel people are no longer family to me." I returned to my apartment, prepared the divorce papers, and began packing my husband's belongings. When he returned and saw his things packed, he initially thought I was joking about divorce. But his shock turned to anger when he saw the actual papers. "You're ending our marriage over something so trivial? You weren't even hurt, were you?" Realizing it was futile to argue, I silently handed him the papers. With reluctance, he signed them and left the apartment. However, it became evident that he didn't have the means to rent another place or hadn't found one yet. The truth was, throughout our marriage, he had been dependent on my income, often spending recklessly and even accumulating debt. After leaving our home, my husband initially stayed with a coworker. But as time passed, even that support faded, and he found himself increasingly isolated. Losing his home, evading debt collectors, and eventually losing his job, he found himself in a dire financial crisis. My mother-in-law has become a topic of neighborhood gossip, with rumors circulating that she drove her daughter-in-law to divorce. It seems she's now avoided by others, and according to my brother-in-law, she lives a solitary life, much like my husband. With my brother-in-law also gone, she's left to manage on just her pension, facing financial strain. In rural areas, having a car is essential, but with no one at home and a strained relationship with the neighbors, she's unable to receive any assistance. It appears my mother-in-law, abandoned by both family and neighbors, lives alone. As for my husband, he's consumed by his own troubles and lacks the means to aid his mother. After our divorce, I replaced the tacky furniture he chose with pieces I love. I've embarked on a new chapter, hopeful for a brighter future and open to new, positive experiences.
At my baby party, Mill got really angry and said mean things to me. She even tried to pick a name for my baby, but then she caused a big problem and the police had to take her away. I'm 29 years old and married to my amazing husband, Gary. Right now, I'm pregnant with our first baby, which is really exciting. Gary and I have been together for a long time. We got married 4 years ago. We've been trying to have a baby for a while, and we were really happy when we found out I was pregnant 6 months ago. We've been through a lot together, but we always stick together. The news of our baby coming soon has made us really happy. Every day gets us closer to meeting our little one, and we're so excited. Being pregnant has been a mix of emotions for me, from the excitement of finding out to those sweet times when you feel the baby moving in your belly. Gary has been amazing through it all. He's come to every doctor's appointment. We've read parenting books together, and he's helping decorate the nursery for our baby. We're fully focused on getting ready for the baby now, talking about names, decorating the nursery, and making plans for the future. Gary can't wait to be a dad, and it makes me really happy. He's fully involved, helping out with everything we need to do before the baby arrives. We're facing the ups and downs of pregnancy together, enjoying every moment as we prepare to meet our little one. 2 months ago, we decided it was time to tell our family the exciting news about my pregnancy. We waited until after the first 3 months of pregnancy had passed, and we were sure everything was okay before telling them. We invited our parents, close family, and friends over for lunch. When they saw my growing belly, their faces lit up with happiness and surprise. My mom started crying tears of joy when she saw me and confirmed that I was pregnant. She understood why we waited to tell everyone and was thrilled to become a grandmother soon. But Gary's mom, Barbara, had a different reaction altogether. Instead of being happy about the news, she got really mad when she found out we hadn't told her about the pregnancy earlier. She felt left out and blamed me for not including her on purpose. Even when I tried to explain why we waited, she stayed angry and didn't want to talk to me anymore. Her unhappiness made the family gathering less joyful. During the night, she didn't talk to me at all. She also showed disrespect to my mom, who had always been nice to her before. While everyone else was chatting, Barbara just stared at her phone, clearly upset. She told everyone how she didn't know I was pregnant, and she felt like she missed out on time with her grandchild even before they were born. My husband and one of his brothers noticed how upset she was. As things got more tense, I felt like I couldn't take it anymore, so I went outside to calm down for a bit. My mom noticed I was upset and came to comfort me until I felt better and went back inside. When it was time for Barbara to leave, she made sure to say goodbye to me last. But she barely said more than a quick hi and bye. Later, when my husband walked them to their car, they ended up having a big argument, and I could hear it from inside. Barbara used the chance to complain about me, making things even more awkward. Luckily, everyone else had left by then, so it was just me, my parents, Gary, and his parents. Barbara was really mad and told my husband she couldn't believe I hadn't told her about the pregnancy sooner. My husband calmly explained that we waited until we knew everything was okay before telling anyone. But Barbara started yelling after hearing this. It was a difficult conversation. Barbara, I should have known about our grandchild right from the start. Gary, Mom, it wasn't about who deserves to know. We both decided together. She just wanted to be careful. Barbara, careful? I'm her mother-in-law. She should have trusted me. It's all her fault. At this point, my husband got really mad. He had been holding back, but when his mom kept blaming me, he got angry. He told her firmly that it wasn't just my decision, it was ours. He said if she was blaming me, she should blame him too. He told her to stop overreacting and get over it. Barbara said he should see things clearly and not let me control everything. She said as his mom, she should have known first about her grandchild. But my husband didn't back down. He told her to stop attacking me and said he loved her, but she needed to leave and calm down before she said something she'd regret. As Barbara walked away, my husband looked frustrated and disappointed. I didn't realize tears were running down my face. Her words hurt me a lot. Gary noticed I was upset and quickly comforted me, leading me back inside. My parents stayed back, sensing the tension until I felt better. Barbara didn't stop there. Later that night, I got a message from her, and I felt really anxious about what it would say. Her message said, I'm really disappointed in you. You purposely kept important news from me, and I can't forgive that. I can't believe you didn't tell me about my grandchild right away. This isn't how a family should be, and it hurts me. Instead of saying sorry for what you did, you're causing problems between me and my son. Shame on you. Her message made me feel really upset and angry. I showed it to Gary, and he was furious. He couldn't understand why his mom was being so mean and blaming me. Gary decided to call her and tell her not to send such mean messages because it made me feel worse. He even said he'd stop talking to her if she kept acting this way. Barbara seemed to listen to Gary's serious words. She changed her tone when faced with the idea of being cut off. Instead of admitting she was wrong, she suggested a solution. She said she'd forgive us if we let her throw us a baby shower. We were surprised by this sudden change and wondered why she was being so nice all of a sudden. She kept saying how happy it would make her to plan a big party for me and our baby, taking care of everything. Gary looked at me wondering what to do, but I wasn't sure if Barbara's sudden change was genuine or just a way for her to control the situation. Even though I wasn't sure about it, Gary, always trying to keep things peaceful, thought we should consider his mom's offer. I told Gary I was worried that accepting her offer might make her think her behavior was okay. Gary understood what I meant, but he hoped that letting his mom plan the baby shower could help fix things and make our family happier before the baby came. I didn't really like the idea, but I agreed to it because Gary thought it might help. He told his mom she could plan the baby shower. She was really happy and thanked us for letting her do it, but I thought she would ask me about what I wanted for the baby shower too. The baby shower was still a month away, and I expected we'd work out all the details together. But I was disappointed to find out that my mother-in-law had taken charge without asking anyone, not even me. She bought decorations, picked games, and planned everything on her own. When my mom tried to talk to her about the baby shower, my mother-in-law said it was all set and would be a surprise for me. I felt really sad and frustrated because the event meant to celebrate me was being planned without thinking about what I wanted. On the day of my baby shower, there was a mix of excitement and nervousness in the air. I got to the banquet hall with my close friends, who were excited to celebrate the baby. When I walked in, I saw the decorations my mother-in-law picked out. There were lots of brown and beige balloons everywhere, like a safari theme gone wrong. I really didn't like it. The atmosphere I imagined was lively and colorful, but this felt dull. Things got even weirder when I saw a big banner near the entrance. It had a bunch of pictures of my husband when he was a baby with his mom, Barbara. Everyone was confused about why those pictures were there at my baby shower. I looked at her with confusion, and she just laughed and said she thought our baby would look exactly like my husband. She thought he was so cute as a baby and wanted to show everyone. I stared at her, wondering if she was serious. It seemed like she cared more about her memories as a mom than celebrating our new family member. As more people came, they looked confused or uncomfortable. The decorations and the big banner with my husband and his mom made the room feel awkward. It wasn't the happy and pretty baby shower I had imagined. I looked at some of my friends, and we silently shared our feelings of apology for what was happening. When my mom came in, she was shocked by the terrible decorations. She saw the big banner too, and I could tell she couldn't believe it. Instead of celebrating our baby, it seemed like it was all about my husband's childhood. My mom didn't say anything. She just walked over to the banner and took it down, showing she was determined to make things right. The room got quiet, and everyone looked at my mom as she took down the big banner that was taking over the celebration. I felt really thankful for my mom's support. My mother-in-law, who was talking to other guests, looked shocked when she saw my mom throwing the banner in the trash. She asked angrily, "What are you doing?" That banner was supposed to celebrate the baby and our family. But my mom stayed calm and said, "This party is about my daughter and her baby, not about showing off your achievements." Everyone around them stopped to watch this unexpected argument. My mother-in-law tried to take back control by saying, "I just wanted everyone to know I helped plan this party." She argued back, saying she just wanted to show how cute Gary was as a kid. But my mom didn't give in. She reminded Barbara that she begged to throw the baby shower after what happened last time. "This is about my daughter and her baby, not about you trying to take over," my mom said firmly. Everyone got quiet as they watched them argue. Barbara realized she wasn't getting her way and went back to talking to other guests with a fake smile. After the argument, the baby shower went on, and I tried to stay positive for my friends and family, even though there was still tension in the air. I didn't think there would be any more surprises from my mother-in-law, but she seemed to be drinking a lot for a baby shower. I couldn't really say anything to her about it though. We played some games, and slowly, everyone started to have fun. Then it was time to open gifts. I was happy with all the thoughtful presents for my baby, but then my mother-in-law gave me a really big gift box with a huge smile. The room got quiet, and I felt embarrassed and frustrated. My mom looked mad, and the guests didn't know what to do with this unexpected moment. Trying to keep things calm, I forced a smile and thanked her for the gift, even though I wanted to roll my eyes. But things got worse when it was time to cut the cake. My mother-in-law got a huge fancy cake with lots of decorations. She made a big deal out of it, making everyone look at her. I was getting annoyed, wondering what she was doing now. We all waited for her to talk. Then she said she had the perfect name for our baby girl. I felt stuck when she said that, remembering we hadn't even decided on a name yet. She proudly said the baby should be named after her great-grandmother, with a name that sounded really old-fashioned. I was surprised and a bit annoyed that she thought she could choose the name. I tried to be nice, saying my husband and I wanted to pick the name together. But she wouldn't listen. She said she had the perfect name and that I should accept it, especially since she spent a lot of money on the baby shower. I was really surprised by her attitude. I told her firmly that only my husband and I could choose our baby's name, no matter who threw the baby shower. But then she started yelling at me in front of everyone. She said I was being disrespectful and should be thankful for what she did. She even insulted my upbringing, saying I should be thanking her instead of deciding the baby's name myself. Barbara got more and more aggressive, pointing at my face. My mom stepped in front of me to protect me. Barbara kept yelling, saying she was the real mommy of my baby because she gave birth to my husband and he's the one who made me pregnant. Her words were really hurtful. Even though my mom tried to stop her, she didn't listen. She just kept insulting me and my mom. It was clear she had too much to drink, and talking to her didn't help. The whole situation was really uncomfortable for everyone. Realizing things were getting worse, I decided I couldn't take any more embarrassment. I wanted to leave with the gifts my friends gave me, but Barbara grabbed them from me and threw them on the ground. She said I was ungrateful and causing problems between her and her son. More people started paying attention to what was happening, and some even started filming. I asked one of my friends to ask everyone to leave politely, hoping to stop the chaos. But Barbara kept yelling at me, making a scene that nobody expected at what was supposed to be a happy party. I got really mad and decided to call the police to get Barbara away from me because I felt unsafe. Can you believe it? I had to involve the police at my own baby shower because of my difficult mother-in-law. When the police came, Barbara acted like she was the victim and blamed me for everything. Luckily, the police understood the situation and tried to talk to her. But because she was drunk, Barbara didn't listen and even yelled at the police. Things got so bad that they had to arrest her right there. I left with my mom and close friends, feeling really shaken up by what happened. Since then, my husband and I have been dealing with the aftermath. Barbara is trying to make us feel guilty and get sympathy from family members who weren't there. My husband thinks I went too far by calling the police. He thinks I should have called him or his dad for help instead. So Reddit, do you think I was wrong for calling the police on Barbara for ruining my baby shower and pretending to be the baby's real mom? Update 1. I want to thank everyone for their support after I shared my story about calling the police at my baby shower. I've never seen my mother-in-law act so aggressively before. Usually, I only see her during holidays, so I never spent much time with her. Her behavior at the baby shower made me worried she might hurt me, especially with my baby on the way. Since then, all the guests from the baby shower have reached out to support me. Some even sent videos of what happened, which I plan to show my husband. I'm going to talk to him seriously about what to do about his mom this weekend. Update 2. I showed the videos to my husband. We sat down and had a serious talk about what happened. I explained how his mom's behavior got worse from when she found out about the pregnancy to the baby shower. I told him about the yelling, accusations, and strange gifts. Then I showed him the videos and he looked shocked. Seeing what happened made him realize how serious it was. He apologized to me for not realizing how bad it was and agreed that calling the police was the right thing to do. I had no idea it was this bad. I'm really sorry you had to deal with all of that, he said, looking regretful and frustrated. He said he never thought his mom could act this badly because it didn't seem like her at all. He told me he was on my side and that my safety, especially during pregnancy, was really important to him. We talked about why his mom acted this way and how she always needed to be in control. Gary admitted he was worried about her behavior and agreed she went too far. I told him I didn't want anything to do with her after what happened at the baby shower. I said he could still talk to her if he wanted, but me and our baby wouldn't be around her until she got help for her behavior. Gary agreed, saying what his mom did was really wrong, and he was ready to cut ties with her too. I told him he didn't have to cut ties with his mom, but he said she disrespected me, so she shouldn't be part of our lives anymore. He knew her behavior wasn't just about the baby shower, but also about other problems. Gary promised to talk to his mom himself and tell her we didn't want her in our lives anymore. I asked him to warn her that if she showed up uninvited and tried to force me to accept her back, I would call the police again. Update 3. It's been a month since I last updated you all. Me and the baby are doing fine. I'm really excited to meet my child soon. Since my last update, we haven't been talking to Barbara. Gary talked to his parents, and his dad promised to talk to Barbara and make sure she respects our decision. Cutting ties with Barbara has changed our lives a lot. Without her drama and negativity, our home feels more peaceful. Now, Gary and I can focus on getting ready for the baby without worrying about Barbara causing trouble. Our friends and family have been really supportive during this tough time. My parents and close friends have been there for us, giving us strength and understanding. Even family members who didn't know how bad Barbara's behavior was have shown support after seeing the videos from the baby shower. Our journey isn't over, but this experience has made us stronger and showed us the importance of facing problems together. Cutting ties with Barbara wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary for our happiness. There might still be challenges, but we're hopeful about the good things this decision brings. As we wait for our baby, we're focused on creating a loving and supportive family for us and our child. When I turned 18, my parents told me to leave home. Now, at 30, I find myself without a place to live. My parents lost all their money, and I'm left on the streets. They never really wanted me. I was just an unexpected addition to their lives. When I was young, life was good, but things changed as I got older. My parents seemed less interested in spending time with me once I wasn't so cute anymore. They were always busy with their business, which was like their whole world. I didn't have any other family nearby, so TV and my teachers were like my family. Even on my birthdays, I often felt alone because my parents were too busy to celebrate with me. They just gave me money to buy whatever I wanted. Christmas and back-to-school shopping were pretty much the same story. We barely had a Christmas tree after I turned 10, but I managed to persuade my parents to get a fake one that I could set up and take down each year. If I had to paint a picture of my parents, they'd be the type who dress in black, enjoy their wine, and have a snobby attitude. The last time I saw them, they hadn't changed much, except my dad had started wearing a toupee. When I turned 16, I asked my parents if I could work part-time at their business, but they said there were no openings. It felt like they didn't want me there. Then, when I turned 18, they expected me to leave home since I was an adult. I was still in high school and working part-time, barely saving for college. Soon after graduation, they gave me an eviction notice and didn't help me move out. I had to rely on a friend's dad for help. I ended up in a rundown apartment, working in retail with no time or experience for college. Just a few months later, I got fired from my job because my manager seemed to have a grudge against me and kept writing me up for trivial reasons. I can't even recall what they were anymore. But I wasn't the only one treated unfairly. I reported the manager to corporate along with others who had similar experiences. Corporate investigated and eventually fired the manager for various reasons, although they kept most of it under wraps. I heard rumors about cigarette theft being one of the reasons, considering the manager was a heavy smoker. Despite corporate's actions, they refused to rehire me, only changing my termination to a layoff on paper to keep my reason clean. It seemed like they didn't want to give me another chance. I quickly ran out of money due to poor financial management and struggled to find steady work, leading to losing my apartment. Desperate, I turned to my parents for help, but they turned me away, leaving me homeless and forced to live in a tent during the winter in someone's backyard. My friends had moved on to college, leaving me behind as a broke kid doing whatever odd jobs I could find to survive. My luck changed when a neighbor of my parents discovered I was living in a tent and offered me shelter to avoid freezing. With her support, I pressured my parents into revealing how to contact my other relatives, although they were reluctant, likely ashamed of how they treated me. Despite their warning not to bother them again, they reluctantly provided me with a list of contact information. I reached out to my paternal grandparents, whom I hadn't seen since I was a baby, and they were overjoyed to hear from me, welcoming me with open arms when they learned of my situation. They immediately flew me over to live with them, essentially adopting me as their own. My parents didn't even bother to see me off at the airport, despite being invited. For nearly a decade, I had no communication with them. My grandparents, upon learning of my parents' mistreatment of me, disowned them legally, removing them from their wills. Although my parents claimed they didn't need anything from my grandparents, their financial situation eventually proved otherwise. After living with my grandparents for about a year, I saved up enough to attend community college. With their support, I earned an associate's degree and landed a good job, thanks to my grandpa's recommendation. Eventually, my grandparents decided to sell me their house so they could retire to Arizona. My grandma's health was suffering in the cold winters, and they wanted to move somewhere warmer. While I was sad to see them leave, I gladly bought the house from them at a third of its value. I'll have it paid off in a few years. My job requires me to travel frequently, keeping me away from home for weeks at a time, but I enjoy the adventure. Right now, I don't have any pets or a girlfriend. I'm focused on my career. However, I hope to find companionship in the future once I have some stability. I don't want to remain a solitary bachelor forever. Returning home after more than 2 weeks away in late 2020, I was startled to find an unfamiliar white van parked in my driveway. Concerned, I was about to contact the authorities when I noticed my parents' business logo on the side of the van, filling me with dread. To my disbelief, my parents had broken into my house and were making themselves at home. Despite my anger, they greeted me casually, as if nothing was wrong. I demanded they leave immediately, but they refused, arguing that it was my grandparents' house. I reminded them that they had sold it to me upon retiring, a fact they would have known had they been involved in my life. However, they persisted, claiming it was their right to stay as it was originally their parents' house. Frustrated, I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door, and called the police. When the police arrived, they were unable to resolve the situation. My parents falsely claimed they had established residency, despite having just arrived, and asserted squatters' rights, lacking evidence to the contrary, and with no surveillance footage or support from neighbors. I found myself in a stalemate. My parents even fabricated a story of a verbal rental agreement with me, and my mother resorted to tears to sway the officers. The police deemed it a family dispute and advised me to pursue legal eviction through the courts, which was complicated by delays due to the pandemic in 2020. Meanwhile, my parents remained in my home without paying rent, flaunting their victory over me. They confessed that their business had collapsed, forcing them to liquidate most of their assets to settle debts. With nothing left but their van and personal belongings, they saw my home as their lifeline for the foreseeable future. Both of my parents managed to secure new jobs after moving in. My father became a delivery driver, while my mother found work as a sales associate. While they were earning, their only contribution was towards the electricity and water bills, which essentially amounted to handing me $100 each month, accompanied by reminders of their generosity. Whenever I broached the subject of proper rent, they dismissed it, arguing that I owed them for the 18 years they spent raising me, despite not requesting reimbursement for that time. They even threatened to withdraw assistance with the utilities altogether if I persisted. Frustrated, I reached out to my grandparents to explain the situation. Though they were displeased, my parents remained adamant, asserting their right to stay in my home. My grandfather expressed regret, acknowledging that had they not sold me the house, my parents wouldn't have taken advantage of the situation. However, I reassured him that I had already initiated legal proceedings for eviction, and my parents were well aware that their stay was temporary. I made sure my parents overheard my determination as I relayed this to my grandparents. Their response was silence. My father, occupied with his delivery job 6 days a week, often kept his distance, clearly discontent with the work. Meanwhile, my mother attempted to assert control over my home during her free time. She insisted on rearranging my living room and even pushed for my parents to claim the master bedroom, arguing they deserved it as my parents. I rejected both demands, asserting that they were not entitled to special treatment and emphasizing that I did not owe them anything simply for raising me, a basic parental duty. It was evident they were trying to assert dominance to prevent eviction. After 4 months, in early 2021, I resorted to legal action against my parents for squatting. Despite their resistance and attempts at manipulation, claiming former ownership by my grandparents and citing their $100 monthly contribution, the lack of a formal rental agreement worked in my favor. Recognizing their futile attempts, the judge ordered their eviction within 30 days. They had no rightful claim to my house. After the court ruling, they confronted me, expressing disappointment for evicting their own flesh and blood. I couldn't help but laugh, seeing the irony in their words, and labeled them as hypocrites for their previous actions toward me. Their lack of concern for my well-being spoke volumes about their supposed parental love. I owed them nothing. They attempted to lay claim to everything that was mine, but their actions hardly reflected those of loving parents. I confronted them, calling them out as snobby, deceitful narcissists, and warned them to prepare for their departure, as I wouldn't hesitate to involve the authorities if necessary. My father's anger was palpable, but my mother intervened, preventing any further escalation. With sneers and tension thick in the air, they eventually left. The final month was fraught with attempts to guilt me or ignore me altogether. I marked each passing day on a calendar in the living room, eagerly anticipating their departure date, which I circled in red. I vividly recall the relief of March 2nd, the day they were finally gone. On the very day they were legally obligated to vacate my home, my parents stubbornly remained, despite having removed all their belongings and even resorting to sleeping on the floor of the guest room in a futile attempt to persuade me to let them stay. They only began searching for an apartment after the court's eviction order was finalized. My mother struggled for weeks to secure a place, eventually settling for a small and subpar studio apartment in a neighboring city due to the limited options available on short notice. The situation bore a striking resemblance to my own experience at 18, adding an ironic twist to the ordeal. I drove my mother to see the apartment, and it was in dismal condition. The walls were an unappealing baby green, the carpet appeared decades old, and the sole window offered a view of a nearby brick wall. Lacking modern amenities, there was no dishwasher, and the stove was unusually small. The bathroom facilities were outdated, with the toilet clearly in need of replacement. The thin walls offered little privacy, as we could hear the loud arguments of neighbors in the adjoining unit. Despite my mother's attempts to evoke sympathy with sad looks and subtle hints about my apparent guilt, I feigned ignorance until she relented. They promptly signed the lease and relocated their meager belongings to the apartment over the weekend. They insisted on taking the queen-size bed, dresser, and flat-screen TV from my guest room, which they had occupied for 5 months. Fed up, I allowed them to take the items, eager to rid my house of reminders of their presence. Their reaction implied they felt slighted, but they left without further demands. As soon as they departed for good, I wasted no time changing the locks on all exterior doors. With all their belongings now in the apartment and their last night spent in my guest room, I began replacing the front door lock while they loaded their van. Their silent observation did little to disrupt my focus, and they left without a word once the new lock was in place. A wave of relief washed over me as their van disappeared down the road. I felt as though karma had finally caught up with them, and I was content to let them live with the consequences of their actions. However, recent communication from my grandparents suggested otherwise. They recently contacted my grandparents to boast about their new business venture, similar to their previous one, now operating in the same state where I reside. Apparently, they're rapidly regaining their former status, enjoying financial success, and indulging in their familiar snobbish lifestyle. I couldn't help but feel a surge of resentment. After subjecting me to homelessness and squatting in my home for months, they seamlessly returned to their privileged ways. Despite my hopes for karma to intervene, their swift resurgence leaves me questioning its existence. Update. Thanks everyone for your helpful advice. I'm starting to see the value in selling the house, especially after discussing it with my grandparents. They support the idea of me moving closer to them if I decide to sell. Moving away would also mean my parents won't be able to track me down easily, which is a big plus. I'm exploring the possibility of getting transferred to a southern location by my company, which I think I'd enjoy due to the warmer climate. Winter has never been my favorite season, especially after having to live in a tent before. Since I'm not deeply rooted where I currently live and don't have many close friends, starting fresh elsewhere doesn't seem too daunting. While I do have some sentimental attachment to this house, it's not like I grew up here, so I'm open to the idea of moving. I understand the importance of beefing up security with more cameras, and I'll be looking into that. Regarding how my parents managed to break in and deceive the police, it was shockingly straightforward. They found an unlocked window, grabbed my spare keys, and then fabricated a story about having a verbal agreement to live here. They even went as far as changing their address with the DMV online to make their claims more convincing. Unfortunately, the police didn't offer much help and just advised me to go through the eviction process. I regret not getting their badge numbers to report their negligence. Quick update. Yes, my parents redirected their mail to my house, adding another layer to their residency claim. If they stayed in my house for over 30 days with my supposed permission, squatters' rights could legally make them tenants. They manipulated the situation and used every tactic to convince the police they had the right to be there. With no clear evidence of how long they'd been living in the house, it became a messy finger-pointing situation, leaving the police uncertain. This led me to pursue eviction through the courts. I did withhold the Wi-Fi password from my parents, since they weren't contributing to the utility bills. However, they found a workaround by using their smartphones as hotspots for internet access during their stay. As for suggestions about leaving negative reviews or exposing my parents' past, I've decided to take the high road and move on. However, if they're involved in fraudulent activities with their new business, I'll be watching with interest to see how it unfolds. Update 2. For those skeptical about the 30-day rule concerning squatters, here's the direct law in the USA. In many areas, if someone resides on your property for over 30 days with your consent, they can claim certain rights, legally becoming your tenants. This often requires following an eviction process. Even in cases where no permission was given, if an unoccupied property is unlawfully entered and lived in, specific rules still apply. My parents manipulated the situation by fabricating permission and misrepresenting their duration of stay in my house, prolonging the eviction process to 5 months. Now you have the facts. Update 3. 5 days later, after some investigation and discussions within the family, I've discovered some curious details about my parents' sudden resurgence into business after bankruptcy. Contrary to speculation, their venture isn't in NLM, even they wouldn't stoop to such tactics. Their new business is notably smaller than their previous one, employing only the two of them compared to their former staff. Concerns were raised about potential identity theft, prompting me to monitor my credit closely, a habit I'd already adopted since dealing with their squatting situation. While I wouldn't put anything past them, there's been no suspicious activity on my credit, indicating they haven't attempted to access company funds through me. My paternal grandparents, who genuinely care for me, remain puzzled about the source of my parents' newfound wealth. Despite their attempts to reach out, my parents' calls have been rebuffed since they boasted about their success. It's evident they received no support from my father's side of the family. What about my mother's side of the family? I remembered I had an old list of contacts from my parents, which included my maternal grandmother's landline number. When I was homeless, I tried reaching out to her, but she showed no interest. Although I've never met them in person, my maternal grandparents seem to share similarities with my parents. It's like my father truly found his match in my mother. As someone pointed out earlier, they seem made for each other. I managed to reconnect with my maternal grandmother only to learn that she's been divorced for a while now, and my maternal grandfather passed away 7 months ago, leaving a significant inheritance to my mother. So that's where the money for their new business came from. My maternal grandmother seemed proud of their success and didn't delve into much else during our conversation. It's likely why my parents boasted to her about their achievements, especially since my good grandparents had cut them off. However, I couldn't care less, and neither could my good grandparents. Everyone on my father's side of the family has distanced themselves from my parents. They want nothing to do with them. It's not just me they've alienated. My mother's side of the family is also fractured, filled with divorcees and loners who dislike each other but pretend to get along. In contrast, my father's side is more normal and kind-hearted. Unfortunately, my father tends to burn bridges repeatedly. Even when I was born, my grandparents wanted to be involved in my life, but my parents kept me away from them for some unknown reason. I'm not entirely sure why they did this, but I suspect it's because they didn't want to face judgment for their own parenting. I would have preferred if they had sent me to boarding school or to live with my grandparents. But I suppose narcissists need someone to belittle to feel satisfied. I can only imagine the things they said about me behind my back all these years. Nevertheless, it seems my parents didn't break any laws to start their new business. At least nothing reportable to the IRS. There's no law against using inheritance money to kickstart self-employment, and my mother inherited everything from her father, including his house and land, where my parents now live. It's not the fanciest place, but it's decent, comparable to my own home. This means my parents have a place to stay without bothering me anymore. I'm considering selling my house and relocating, but unfortunately, my current employer doesn't have a branch in Arizona. So my options are either to resign and seek employment in Arizona after selling my house, or to stay put and hope my parents don't bother me again. I'm actively searching for job opportunities because I'm determined not to let my parents find me ever again. If moving proves impossible, I'll invest in installing cameras both inside and outside my house for added security. While I doubt a similar situation will occur, I want to ensure my parents never try to track me down again for any reason. If they need assistance in their old age, I won't be there for them. They'll receive what they gave, nothing. They're dead to me, and the rest of my father's family feels the same way. If I ever have children or stepchildren, I'll make sure I never become like my parents. No child should endure what I did.